She hadn't spoken a word in 3 years in the Alzheimer's unit. Then the Apollo 11 50th anniversary documentary started on TV. The elderly woman stood up, pointed at the screen, and spoke for the first time. I wrote that code. I calculated that trajectory. Everyone was shocked, until NASA archives were checked. Houston, Texas, Shady Oaks Nursing Home, July 21st, 2019. The television was on in the Alzheimer unit's common room. CNN was broadcasting the Apollo 11 50th anniversary special. Most patients weren't aware. Some sleeping, some staring blankly. In the corner wheelchair sat Dorothy Johnson, 92 years old, snow-white hair, frail hands, vacant stare, 3 years at Shady Oaks, mid-stage Alzheimer's. Didn't speak, didn't respond, just stared out the window. Nurse Sarah Chen, 24, was in her second week of internship. She'd tried connecting with Dorothy, but no response. Her file had minimal information. Born 1927, occupation, retired government employee, no family, NASA pension. NASA. Sarah had asked the head nurse. Probably a secretary, Maria had said. Lots of women worked as secretaries at NASA in the 60s. Sarah was watching the television. Neil Armstrong's voice filled the room. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And in that moment, Dorothy moved. For the first time in 3 years, she lifted her head. Eyes focused on the television. Hands began trembling. Not Alzheimer's tremor, but recognition tremor. Mission Control appeared on screen. 1969. Young engineers, computers, calculators. Dorothy stood up. Sarah was shocked. Dorothy couldn't walk. At least hadn't walked in 3 years. But now, the 92-year-old Alzheimer's patient was walking toward the television, stumbling, but determined. On screen, a voice. The trajectory calculations were critical. One error, and Apollo 11 would have been lost in space. Dorothy pointed at the screen and spoke. For the first time in 3 years, I wrote that code. Voice hoarse, shaky, but clear. I calculated that trajectory. Sarah froze. Other nurses turned. The room fell silent. Maria rushed over. Dorothy. Dorothy, can you hear me? Dorothy didn't look at her. Eyes fixed on the screen. Translunar injection. 3.425 kilometers per second. 6-degree angle. I calculated that. The documentary narrator continued. NASA's computers calculated. No, Dorothy shouted. Everyone jumped. Computers didn't calculate. People calculated. WE calculated. The women. Us. Maria approached. Dorothy, calm down. You were at NASA? Dorothy turned to her. For the first time, clarity in her eyes. Johnson. Dorothy Eleanor Johnson, mathematician, Langley Research Center, 1953 to 1987. Apollo, Gemini, Mercury. All of them. Sarah pulled out her phone. Googled, Dorothy Johnson, NASA mathematician. No results. Of course not, said Dorothy. We were invisible. Hidden figures, hidden heroes, black women, white women, all of us hidden. Catherine, Mary, ones like me. We did the calculations. They got the recognition. Maria was skeptical. Dorothy, if you were really there, prove it. Dorothy smiled. First time in 3 years. July 11th, 1969. 13:32 hours. Saturn V launch. Fuel, 2,800,000 kilograms. Thrust, 34.5 million newtons. Orbital angle, 32.5 degrees. Lunar arrival, 4 days, 6 hours, 45 minutes, 40 seconds. She paused. Margin of error, 14 seconds. MY error, my only error in 34 years. Sarah was still searching Google, then stopped. Wait. Dorothy Johnson. Found it. But no photo, just... My God. She showed the phone. NASA archive. A small note. D.E. Johnson. Mathematics specialist. Orbital Mechanics Division. 1953. to 1987. Contributing missions, 47. Classified. Maria took the phone. Read. 47 missions. Dorothy, you. I was a computer, said Dorothy. Human computer. Electronic computers were unreliable. We verified every calculation, every orbit, every rotation angle. On television, Armstrong was stepping onto the moon. Dorothy began crying. Right there. My calculations got him there and brought him home. Next day, nursing home director's office, Director Janet Williams sat at her desk. Across from her, Sarah, Maria, and Dorothy. An old notebook lay before Dorothy. We found this in your room, said Janet. We looked, with permission. The notebook was filled with calculations, rocket equations, orbital formulas, angle computations, 50 years old. You still remember these? Janet asked. Dorothy nodded. Alzheimer's takes some things, but mathematics stays. Dorothy, why didn't you ever say? Why did you stay quiet? Dorothy looked out the window. In 1969, when we landed on the moon, there was a press conference. Only male engineers were invited. We, the women computers, celebrated in the back room, had cake, coffee, went home. She paused. I worked 34 years. My name never appeared in any documentary, any book, until Hidden Figures came out in 2016, but that only told Katherine Johnson's story. Ones like me are still hidden. Janet picked up the phone. I'm calling NASA. For what? Dorothy asked. To honor you. Dorothy laughed, a bitter laugh. I'm 92. I have Alzheimer's. It's too late. It's never too late, said Sarah. 1 week later, the nursing home's conference room was packed. Local press, NASA representatives, even the Houston mayor had come. Dr. James Mitchell from NASA was speaking at the podium. Dorothy Eleanor Johnson joined NASA, then NACA, in 1953 as a mathematician. For 34 years, she performed critical calculations for 47 space missions. 30% of Apollo 11's lunar orbital calculations were her work. Dorothy sat in the front row. Today was a clear day. Alzheimer's sometimes allowed that. Mitchell continued. Today, 50 years late perhaps, NASA is awarding Dorothy Johnson the Exceptional Service Medal. The room rose to its feet. Applause. Dorothy shakily stood. Sarah helped. They walked to the stage. Mitchell pinned the medal. Thank you, Dorothy. Humanity's journey to the moon was possible because of you. Dorothy approached the microphone. I just loved mathematics. Numbers don't lie. People forget, but numbers remember. E equals MC squared, always. F equals MA, always. Unchanging. She stopped, looked confused. Alzheimer's was returning. Who am I? Sarah approached, whispered, You're Dorothy Johnson, NASA mathematician, the woman who went to the moon. Dorothy smiled. Oh yes, the moon. Beautiful calculation. 1 month later, Dorothy's story had gone viral. Hashtag Hidden Figures 2 was trending. Hundreds of letters, emails had come. She sat in her room with Sarah. Sarah was reading letters. This is from an MIT student. Says, because of you, I'm studying astrophysics. Dorothy smiled, but didn't respond. Today was a bad day. This is from NASA. They want to name a crater after you. On the moon. Dorothy lifted her head. The moon. Yes, Dorothy E. Johnson crater. What coordinates? Sarah looked. Mare Tranquillitatis, 23 degrees north, 45 degrees east. Dorothy's eyes brightened. For a moment the old woman was gone. The young mathematician returned. Sea of Tranquility, near Apollo 11. How appropriate. A knock at the door. A young woman entered. Black, 30s, NASA jacket. Mrs. Johnson, I'm Dr. Tanya Williams, NASA Mathematics Division. I came to thank you. Dorothy looked, but didn't recognize her. Tanya continued. Your notes. Your 1969 calculations. We're studying them. You found corrections the computers missed. Without those corrections, Apollo 11 would have missed the moon, lost in space. Dorothy nodded. I know. I did it. How? Even the computer didn't notice. Dorothy laughed. Computers calculate. Humans think. That's the difference. 3 months later, Dorothy's 93rd birthday party in the nursing home garden. NASA had prepared a surprise. A giant screen had been set up. Live connection. Greetings to Dorothy Johnson from the International Space Station. Astronauts on the ISS were waving. The commander spoke. Mrs. Johnson, I'm Commander Sarah Mills. We're here because of your calculations. You showed the way 50 years ago. Dorothy looked at the screen. A clear moment. Is your orbit stable? She asked. The commander laughed. Yes, ma'am. 408 kilometers, 27,600 kilometers per hour. Good, said Dorothy. My calculations were correct. Then Earth appeared on screen. Blue, beautiful, fragile. Dorothy cried. That's why, she said. Why I calculated. To look from there. To understand how small and precious we are. 6 months later, Dorothy died in her sleep. 93 years old. Peacefully. At her funeral were NASA management, astronauts, mathematics professors, students. Margot Lee Shetterly, author of Hidden Figures, spoke. I couldn't find Dorothy Johnson when writing my book. She was too hidden. But she was as important as Katherine Johnson, maybe more, because she didn't just calculate, she found errors. She saved lives. The NASA director spoke. Today, I announce the Dorothy Johnson Mathematics Scholarship, given annually to female mathematics students. Dorothy's legacy will live on. Sarah, now head nurse, was the last speaker. Dorothy taught me something. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the quietest ones, but their silence doesn't diminish their importance. Dorothy was silent for 3 years, but when she spoke, the world listened and remembered. Apollo 11's 51st anniversary. Live broadcast from the moon. Artemis mission astronaut stands at the crater's edge. This is Dorothy E. Johnson Crater, named for a 92-year-old woman. She had Alzheimer's, but she never forgot mathematics, and she brought us here. The astronaut places a small plaque beside the American flag. Dorothy Eleanor Johnson, 1927 to 2020. Human computer, the woman who calculated the path. Numbers don't lie. On Earth, at Shady Oaks Nursing Home, the television was on. Alzheimer's unit patients watching, most without understanding. But Sarah knew. In Dorothy's corner, sunlight was streaming. And for a moment, it seemed the old woman was there, smiling. Good calculation, Sarah whispered. Perfect calculation, Dorothy. And on the moon, 384,400 kilometers away, Dorothy's name shone forever. For the silent heroes, for the invisible, for those who calculate, to be remembered.